Oh, I do. Good. We'll use Good. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. This is our 4th annual STEM Conference. And today I'm here to introduce our keynote speaker, David Temple. I've known Dave for probably more years than I care to admit. Dave and I went to graduate school together back for anthropology. So there's a bonus prize in it if you know the difference between anthropology and paleontology, because they're not the same. Do I see a hand? Make sure whose hand is up. Gentleman in the green shirt. Wait, there's a lot of green shirts back there.
Ancient history.
What?
Yes. I know that.
Yeah, you got anthropology right.
Paleontology is the study of fossils.
That's right. There's one area where they overlap. Only one though. And it gets very ugly. In fact, my museum was mocked nationally and internationally because of that one. When they said you were a second-tier museum, and the president and I actually high-fived. You know why? Because he said, "We're number 2. We're number 2." When we started out. All right. Well, Dave got his undergraduate degree at the University of West Virginia, doing international studies, specializing in Africa. Had a brief career as a pilot trainee in the Air Force. Was a stockbroker for a while in Houston. I met him when he was studying anthropology at the University of Houston. I kind of went on into IT, and Dave went on into museum work. And he's been at the Museum of Natural History in Houston, Texas, which is a wonderful museum. If you ever go, you have to visit. He's been there for 25 years. Started out as a director of volunteers, later on in the education area. But Dave's always been kind of a field scientist. One of my favorite stories is a long road trip that he and I took at one point, and every time we passed a dead animal, we pretty much had to stop and figure out what it was. So he's always been interested in wildlife and animal behavior and herpetology, and so it was pretty rapidly he got involved in their paleontology program. They've recently built a new paleontology wing. Dave was very instrumental in that, and his current role is the Associate Curator of Paleontology at the Houston Museum of Natural Science. So why don't you join me in welcoming Dave? Yeah, that's great. I'm glad he brought up the Air Force thing. I've always been a little bit on the edge as far as rules and things like that go. It has helped my career a great bit, with the exception of the military. They have no sense of humor. And the term they used to describe me was dangerous. I was probably the last person to see Top Gun because I was a little bitter. And I wasn't dangerous like the sexy dangerous where you see Tom Cruise and the Russian MiG, in an inverted dive, together, being rude to each other. I was the kind of dangerous where it was, Lieutenant Temple, his power lines look a little large. So that was my brand of dangerous. But I do enjoy the military and I love it. And thank you for having me here. Who's the students here? Who actually goes here? Or to this college?
I do.
You do? That's good. This facility is great. This is a real gem for your community. I have been very impressed with everything I've seen, and it folds into many of the things that we try to do at the museum. So I want to talk to you today a little bit about STEM, which I am kind of on fire about this. And I'll admit, I am not a long-term teacher. I am not that long to STEM even. And what I realized was, from just the stuff that we do, field science in particular, and paleontology is all about STEM. And I work with a lot of students. I work with students as young as 2nd grade, 3rd grade. I have college interns. I have lots and lots of high school students. Because of my tenure at the museum as a volunteer director, I'm very comfortable with doing that. So many of the people that come and work for me, and this is the key thing in STEM, is they're actually doing real science. So some of the things I'll show you here today were done by teenagers, and they will appear in major publications. So it's what I call a live fire drill. So, and what I've discovered, even with young children as well, when they understand and they know that what they're dealing with is not a simulation, it's not something that an educational exercise that we have concocted for them to teach a certain point, that they generally, almost always, rise, even the younger kids, sense that, know it, and they rise to the challenge. So if we can get the lights, I don't know who's working the lights. I have a few things just as sort of an icebreaker here. We did build a new paleo hall, and it was the project of a lifetime. It's something that I think about frequently. It was a very difficult thing. We expanded the museum by 1 million square feet. The paleo hall previous that we had to this was maybe about 8,000 square feet. We took it to 30,000 square feet. So it was a considerable investment in time, money, and all of that. We do a lot of field work. I have a field program, and partially in trying to help out in this, I put together a development video, and I will throw this out. Actually, I'm going to throw this out as a way not to do it. And I will also tell you that if you're on a dating website, this doesn't work either. Nobody likes this. And it's like a sad joke that you just won't give up on. So here we go again. So this was circulated to our board, but it didn't really get us any good stuff. I will tell you, and this is the truth. Well, there we go. You missed our video. I've had a nightmare. It's actually the truth. I really did have this nightmare. And I died, and I went to hell. And in hell, my job was the AV guy. And I was responsible for all the AV in hell. And it was the most sublime insight into the true world of evil I could ever have. Because I was tortured because I went to do the presentation, nothing worked. The speaker was tortured because the speaking didn't happen, it didn't work. The audience was tortured because it didn't go off as planned.
David, do you want to, I think I know what to do because I had the same problem in my classroom. I couldn't get the video, they showed me how it worked.
Really? You know how to do it?
I think
yes.
if you guys are willing to take a chance.
You'll have to send it back one.
Yeah, okay, if you're willing to take a chance, I think I know what to do because I had the same problem.
Okay, I'm willing to take a chance. I was gonna make this a very interactive presentation. I didn't figure the AV would be part of it. That really wasn't on the plan. You get to play? Play. Wait, there you go. Nope, that one. Nope, yeah, over there. Nope, yeah, there we go. Right there, no.
Right.
Okay, what did I do wrong? No, we don't need to waste our time.
We're going to go.
Okay, so, originally the thought was to have the Sally Struthers music piped in over this, but we didn't. But it didn't raise any money either. It's not helping me out on like Christian music, for that matter either. So it's a cost of only 1 cup of coffee a day. You also get a villa and antique china.
This there, I ain't gonna lie. I just need about $10 million to display some fossils, get something cold to drink, and maybe get bath.
The bath is the more expensive part. But that was at our site in Seymour, and the jacket that we're working on there is an animal that you actually have a representative of downstairs, which is Dimetrodon. So we work with an awful lot of Dimetrodon, and we'll talk about Dimetrodon quite a bit. Now, museum and STEM experience. One thing that I found is that anybody in the museum business and in the teaching business, if there's any teachers here, you're in the knowledge business, but you're also a matchmaker. You're in the love business. And when you think about anything in your life that has shaped you, or that you like, or that's anything that's a passion, you had to get it probably from somebody else. You may have read a book, you may have seen a video, but more than likely, you had face-to-face contact with somebody who was either just a person in that field who had those interests, or with the teachers. And I throw this up here because there's two things that, thanks to Mrs. McElroy in 5th grade history, I became obsessed with the monitor and Civil War history. And I can tell the point in which that happened. And of course, I also became obsessed with economic history and coin collecting, which is something that Rob and I knew from back in the day. And that, again, was from another person, James W. Strutter. And I can remember that moment that you see that thing and you fall in love with it. And you can't really explain it. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about field science and taking people in the field. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but when it does, it's magical. And that's also one of the things that I think is very important to STEM, because it's not something that they get to experience. They get to have the discovery themselves. So there's lots of technologies. And I was talking with some people about this, and I was saying, what is the most technological, exciting thing that's going on in paleontology right now? What is it? And there's a lot of things that I think could be. There's a lot of advances in scanning and reproducing things. There's a lot of things that they're finding out that aren't supposed to be there. But what it boils down to is molecules. So there's things now in paleo. This is an amazing age. And I wish I were younger. I wish I were younger, because I would love to participate in some of this. They're finding things that were previously thought impossible. For instance, dinosaur skin, impossible. Soft tissue, impossible. And it was possible, but because the people's mindset, or the scientists' mindset, was this can't happen, they never looked. And it turns out it is. So this is our Triceratops in Houston. Its name is Lane. And believe it or not, Lane, there's 2 Triceratops removed from this one person's property, and it's probably something kind of like you guys. The first Triceratops got named for the brother, whose name is Kelsey. The second Triceratops got named for the sister, whose name is Lane. Sadly, Lane's is a better specimen. And they fight about that all the time. I have them on videotape fighting and arguing over which one of them has the best TRex name for them. Turns into Triceratops. Turns out, though, this is the best Triceratops in the world. And it's going to change science in maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years. And the reason why it's going to change it is truly a mummy in every sense of the word. Now, the fact that it has the skin on it is impressive. In fact, when we acquired this specimen raw. And what that means in the fossil business, it had been excavated, it was in the jackets, just like that big thing you saw me hacking on, so they have some idea of what's in there, but they don't know the full scope. It's not exactly a pig in a poke, but it's a pig in a poke. So, but the people that we acquired it from said, oh, there's skin peeking out, which that's always nice. Who doesn't like skin? So these are some of the scales right here. They're from different parts of the body. This is currently the #1 Triceratops in the world. One of the reasons is that you never, ever, in only maybe 3 or 4 examples, ever find the skull with the body. You always find the body, or you always find the skull. And skulls are kind of common. I've seen skulls, a lot of skulls in the Badlands. Bodies are much harder to find. Why do you think that is? Why? No? Think about, well, anytime you want to be a fossil, you want to think about fossils, you have to think about something that's called taphonomy, and you got to think about rotting. Stinking, stinking, rotting. What happens to the corpse after death? And what happens, yes, you in the back?
It basically looks like it deflated, and then the bones scatter everywhere.
It's called float and bloat. And this specimen has the best ribs of any Triceratops. And when you take the head off of it, it looks like a beach ball. Almost every Triceratops you see in other museums, they substitute duckbill ribs. Because a lot of times you don't find the ribs. And duckbills have a very narrow chest, so the ribs come off like this. Turns out, Triceratops ribs are really huge. If you take that skull off, it looks like a giant beach ball. But what happens is, this is so much heavier, it floats, or it bloats, it floats, and the tissues holding the skull on are relatively weak, it rots, the skull drops off one spot, the body washes down, and gets buried, and you find the body somewhere else. On ours, they were found together. And they found a few more like this. And what really makes Lane special is this. And this is what is hard to get, even I have trouble getting my head around. Is this. Now this is the skin. But it's not the imprint of the skin. We have other dinosaurs that have it's the imprint of the skin. Dinosaur dies, falls in the mud lithifies. You can actually feel it. And I tell students and people that visit our museum, you're not supposed to touch anything. And there's a couple reasons for that. But if you're with somebody, always let them touch. Close your eyes, clear your mind, get your fingers sensitive, and just gently drag it across the surface of that skin. And that's what it's like to pet a dinosaur. So you just have to focus your attention to your fingertips. But this is different. Oh my gosh, it's different. There's a couple things about it that are very weird. One is, if you notice on that first slide, the scales are very different. They're very different on the back, from the side, to the belly. And the thing that's remarkable about this is the skin is still there. It's still there. And this is one of the great things about paleo and STEM. Two fields, and there may be others, but the two that I know the most about and I'm the most passionate about, and it's kind of like that American business proverb, if it's worth having, it's worth stealing. And paleontology and archaeology are consumers of other people's science. So if you're a weird kid and you like to do things like stick the other head on the Mr. Potato Head, or you want to mix things up, or you look at something and you think about using it in an atypical way, paleontology and archaeology, you have a future for that. So the same technology, the same idea they use for getting the composition of stars, they can do that with certain fossils. And what it tells them is they can track the atoms across. What that means is those molecules are gone, but those atoms from 65 million years ago are sitting right there. And there's a way you can sample those atoms. Now, okay, wow, that's fun. Atoms are there. What can you get out of that? What does that mean?
Oh, wait, you can get a weird dinosaur.
No, not quite. What do you think you can get? What's the low-hanging fruit? What's the first thing you get? So you can track. I've seen them do this. You can track the frequency of atoms, different atoms, across the surface of this thing. So you go spot, and then you get another pattern, another pattern, another pattern, another pattern, another pattern, another pattern. What can you get out of that? The low-hanging fruit. Yes, sir. You in the back?
DNA?
No. No DNA is preserved. Although, I'll talk about that in a minute. There's some exciting things about that. What can you get? Well, first off, you figure out, holy cow, look at these patterns. This thing had spots. Or, wow, look at this. It's got stripes. Or you can tell spots and stripes. That's easy. That's the low-hanging fruit. The thing that you're going to then get in the argument of, once you get everybody to agree on that in the scientific community, then you go after color. And so, because of this specimen, and there's a PhD being written on it right now, we may know two things that will come out of this. The actual looking of a Triceratops, how it appears, as far as spots, stripes, things like that, or color. And it's all because they're actually using a technology that's not intended for this at all. It's very simple. It's very elegant. Now, the other thing about this, where this has already changed the world, is that there, and there's a few others scattered across the whole thing. And what in the world is that? Ah! How do I go back? Back arrow? Left arrow. Is there a left arrow on here?
Right side of the
No.
keyboard.
The left arrow's on the right?
Left arrow? No, left.
Okay. Well, that pontal I showed you, what this shows is, believe it or not, Triceratops had feathers. It was covered with quills. And this specimen is 100% of the world's supply of that. And what it has is it has small quills that protrude off the back. And they don't know. The artist reconstruction on it is very conservative. They make them about 6, 8, 10 inches long. They could have been much longer. They know they're not articulatable. They can't change them around. They couldn't move them, but they were there. And yes, sir.
You're talking about color.
Yes.
Mineralization.
Ah!
How does that? How do you know the color that's sitting on the mineral?
Ah! That is the other thing. Now but that's not insurmountable, and they've done that with other fossils as well. They know the color of Archaeopteryx. What you have to do is you have to look at it and you have to prove to everybody's skeptical satisfaction that it's not an invasive, like a mineral-rich fluid or something that came in there and deposited those minerals. You have to prove that it was on the specimen. And how do you do that? What does that? How can I stand up in front of you and say that confidently? And what's the thing that's going to set the barrier that's going to make you be able to say that?
Looking at the molecules, and like you said.
Well, for one thing, you just look at the fossil. And so if those minerals or those atoms are all in the sediments all around it, then maybe it is inclusive, or maybe it is something that's intrusive. But if it's only in these isolated little pockets, it's directly in association with the fossil, then that makes a much tougher argument. So if you look at this one, this is an artist's reconstruction of Lane, and there you go. And he had quills. And they're not sure, they have no idea how tall they were. They just know they're there. They're not sure what they use them for, but they know they're there. So the thought is, and y'all probably saw Bob talk a couple of years ago, his argument would be display. But they don't know. But you know what? Duh, it makes perfect sense that this thing would have those. Because one of its earliest relatives is covered with it. The ones they get out of China, they're much smaller, they're much older, but they have a lot of quills, and they've documented those as well. So it's not totally impossible. Now, this is YREX. We actually have 4 T-Rexes in Houston. And one of the ideas, the original ideas for the maquette for mounting this display is we wanted to have a pack of T-Rexes that would be hunting him. And what could be more terrifying than having a pack of T-Rexes that you're being pursued by? Didn't go that way. We spaced them out. We have 4. They're all different. This is YREX. YREX is important because YREX is our original specimen. So one of them is original. YREX is the original. If you want to see, this was featured very prominently in a documentary by National Geographic. It was filmed maybe about a year ago. In fact, this hand was in the documentary. So this is my 60 seconds of fame right here, because I was driving the lift. So what they found out was his tail, and it's truncated here, but that's right on the margin. His tail had been bitten off. And the question was, and what they found is they looked more closely at the anatomy of T-Rexes. These things lived a very hard life. They have lots of broken bones. They have lots of things that are wrong with them, lots of injuries. They're very susceptible to that. And in the case of YREX, his tail was completely bitten off. And the beauty of it is, it's very obvious. It doesn't take, you don't have to kind of look at it with a microscope and from the side and get the light. When you look at the center of that vertebra, it has been split clean in two by something sharp and something pointed. And the only thing that could do that is another T-Rex. So, a couple other features about him that's interesting is this specimen right here has 100% of the world's supply of T-Rex skin. And that it couldn't be weirder. In fact, most people didn't accept it for a long time because they have tiny patches from the skin of the feet, and they have tiny patches up along the tail right there. And he was also found with 26 turtles. And Bob had said that those turtles were really, those turtles were the ones that took him out. The turtles were they attacked this animal and killed it. But, of course, he's saying that in jest. What they were doing, though, they were probably in the pond where he was dying, or he had died, and they were consuming the carcass. They were scavenging the carcass. So what's interesting about this guy, as far as the patches of skin, is on the Triceratops skin, the scales are huge. They're blocky. They've got giant ones on the back. They've got giant ones on the side. The belly ones are really square and very heavy. The scales on the T-Rex, the ones from the feet, the ones from the tail, and people said, oh, it's from the turtle. It's not from T-Rex because it's just too tiny. But tiny little scales. Tiny, tiny little scales. So the skin would have just hung on this thing. It would have been almost relative to its size like iguana scales or something like that. It would have been very, very fine. Now, one of the other things is sort of a new technology that's coming out is they have all different ways of looking at anatomy, of looking at fossil bones. And this is from a paper that really did change my life to a degree. It was given at the T-Rex meetings by a gentleman, Dr. Hack. And at the T-Rex meetings, but his paper wasn't about T-Rex. His paper was about a Triceratops that met a T-Rex. And one of the things, and you may have heard this now, in fact, the argument has kind of died down. They've moved on to other arguments, but it's still there. Was T-Rex a scavenger? Was T-Rex a predator? What do you think? What do you think? Scavenger or predator?
Probably both.
Actually, that's one of the things I love about science and paleontologist science, is they say, oh, it's either or. No, both is probably the actual answer. I agree with you on that totally. But the question is, some people are saying it's an obligate scavenger, which means scavenge all the time. Some people are saying it's predator. And I love, there's a what's that guy, Gary Larson cartoon, where he has a nerdy kind of chubby kid like me with the thick glasses, and they push the TV down the gullet of an open T-Rex jaw, and he says to his little friend, "See, I told you it would eat anything," which is true. But what they found from this is, what would prove that it was a scavenger or predator? What would prove that? When you think about biology, and you think about things in nature today, and we have to use nature today as kind of an interpretation for this, what proves it? What would you have to find? And so if they hadn't found it, and I've seen kills that have been predated on by a T-Rex, they're actually fairly common. Now that people know what to look for, and the description is, does the animal look like it swallowed a hand grenade? And you go, yes. Okay, it might be a T-Rex kill. The other thing is you find the shed teeth associated with it. Yes, sir. What's the proof? What's the one thing that would turn that argument upside down?
You might be able
And it did.
to.
Are animals, when they hunt, are they successful 100% of the time? No, they're not. And so what happens with this is, if you can find an animal that was attacked by a T-Rex and wounded, but lived, that would mean that it wasn't, it was hunting something actively, and it failed. And in fact, that's what this gentleman had found with the Triceratops he was digging. And he did sort of some anatomy of how it was attacked, and what you sort of see is, one thing's for sure is, if you were a predator, and you're getting ready to take out your prey, where do you attack it? Yeah, from the back, right? You don't attack at the strongest point on the front. This was attacking the strongest point on the front, which means that the bites weren't offensive, they were defensive. The T-Rex is trying to avoid being gored. And this is how we have our display in Houston, and this is the old artwork, which is very good, but you don't see the spines, you don't see the quills, and that will be changing. Now, another project that we just did that's very exciting for new technologies and molecules, but not in the way that most people would think, is we just started doing an amber exhibit. We have a collection that we borrowed from the American Museum of Natural Science. They have it being curated there by one of their curators, insect curators, David Grimaldi. And they found things in this amber that are truly unique. Now, in Jurassic Park, they wanted you to believe, and this is a chunk of this stuff from here, from those mines that they were talking about in the movie, that you could take this and get a dinosaur. Why is that just utterly false from the get-go? Even if you believe that this might preserve an organic molecule, it couldn't happen in that movie the way it was represented. It couldn't happen. And the reason it couldn't happen is this stuff, the Latoka Mines, the Dominican Republic, amber, is not old enough. It's only about 15, 17 million years old. You can't get dinosaurs out of that. Now, in the early 90s, a gentleman by the name of Poignard said he could get DNA out of this stuff. And he did some papers, he studied, he did it. The problem is, everybody else that tried it after that couldn't get the DNA. And that's one of the things in science is it has to be consistent and reproducible. Poignard says the rest of the world is an idiot. And they're not able to do that. I think basically, that may be oversimplifying his case. But he couldn't. But this stuff is from Burma. It's from Myanmar. And they've got a hard date on it. In fact, they used to think that it was remixed Eocene. It's not. It's Cretaceous. And the way they were able to determine it was Cretaceous is they looked at the things that were in it and they said, these insects, these animals, are not Eocene. This is not right for Eocene. So they actually looked at the animals that were in the amber, and what they determined was that it's Cretaceous, early Cretaceous, and they got a hard date on it, and what that ended up meaning was 99 to 100 million years ago. What's alive 99 to 100 million years ago? Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs. This is the stuff where the dinosaurs are. Now, one of the key points about this that's very fascinating is lots and lots and lots of feathers. And we also know at this time there's two feathered animals walking around on the face of the earth. One of them is birds. What's the other? Dinosaurs. And so, some in this collection, some of these feathers are dinosaur feathers. The problem is, we can't tell yet. First they said, well, if they're primitive, if they have primitive characteristics, they're dinosaurs. And then somebody, probably like you, stood up in the back of the room and said, why has it got to be primitive? And you're like, well, it's an assumption. So, we don't know. We're trying to figure it out. This, please play. Go back. All right, back. This is embarrassing. There, okay. Right in the middle. I'm sorry. Nah, okay, there you go. This is actually a really big deal. What's it look like? It's supposed to rotate, but it doesn't rotate, it'll work out. What's it look like? It's a wing and feet of either a tiny bird, maybe smaller than a hummingbird, or possibly a dinosaur. A tiny dinosaur the size of a hummingbird. And this specimen is actually, it's contested at this point. In fact, when I actually met the collector that owns this, and I said, oh, you collect minerals, what else do you collect? Amber. And he sort of said, oh, and I have the dinosaur amber. And of course, not having much of a filter, my first response was, oh yeah, I heard that was total fake. Which I probably shouldn't say that on tape. But anyway, we had a conversation about it. It turns out it's not fake. Can't necessarily say it's a dinosaur feather for sure, but it's a bird, and it's a 99 million year old amber. Now, the thing that's interesting, that's really been kind of a surprise for everybody, because amber has the best preservation of any mode of fossilization. And we're not really sure how it works. I'll say carbonization. I've been saying carbonization. Everybody says that. That's how preserved. But it turns out at the nano level, amber is very porous. DNA will not preserve. You can't get any DNA. But here's the weird part. It will preserve at a cellular level. So if you extract this stuff in an electron scanning microscope, you will see the individual cells of the animal. You'll be able to identify the components of the cell of the animal. And one thing that I've been very interested in working on lately is we have a specialized preservation thing on our site looking for bacteria. You're not going to find it there. Amber, they will find ancient bacteria. One of the things that's surprising about all the feathers, now when we talk about dinosaurs and feathered dinosaurs, they used to always just paint them gray, because we didn't know. And there's still curators that will only paint them gray. But since we know they're closely aligned with birds, color is very important to birds, so now they reconstruct dinosaurs as being a bit more colorful than they used to in the past. All the melanosomes, or the feathers in amber, are completely preserved. They could tell the color if it was there, and it is there. And the color is black. So, the models that we have as far as birds and color, and maybe it's just because it's from this one locality and this one sort of bird that was there, and they all were black or sometimes white, like a magpie, but they weren't extremely colorful. And if they're able to figure out, if they do actually find a dinosaur in amber, they'll probably have a very good way of knowing the color of it, and it might not be what we think. It might not be as colorful. Some other things that we have here is the insects. This is a really weird insect. If you were to name this insect, what name would you give that insect? And it is blown up. What would you call that insect? What? Ted? Roy? Really weird insect. I like that. Somebody else want to try to improve upon that?
Some sort of beetle?
No, it's actually an ant. Yes. But here's the thing. They didn't know. And there's been nothing like this found before. And this is also sort of showcasing a new technology where they micro-CAT scan the insects in the amber, and then you can either do models of them, digital models, large, where you can study all the anatomy, or you take that model, you run it through a 3D printer, and you get that. So the name of that ant is Hadomyrmex. Hadomyrmex. Are you up on your Latin? You don't know what that means? Good. This means you're being raised right in this case. Hadomyrmex. What it means is hell ant. And the reason is they've seen nothing like it before, and the only way they think that this thing could possibly eat, and there's its jaws right there. They know those jaws would articulate down, it would come up to some soft-bodied insect, it would stab the insect, pull it up, And the hemolymph, the insect blood, would flow down those teeth and drip right into the mouth parts. So it's really a vampire, but they call it a hell ant. That's why it's named that. They're not much bigger than a regular fire ant. So to us, it's not that it would be very dangerous. It is super weird. Okay, so there's other things, and I'll just talk briefly about this one right here because this is a very exciting one. They can do experiments on this right now that might change the world, but they don't. The reason why they don't is because the sample size of that particular piece is exactly 1, and you're looking at it. What is it? What do you think it is?
Tick.
It's a tick. It's exactly right. And it's not just any tick, it's a bloated tick. So this tick was preserved in amber with a blood meal in its gut. So it might be possible to sample the gut of this and tell at some level what was it eating? Was it eating birds? Was it eating reptiles, mammals? Or might there be something in its stomach that we wouldn't recognize at all? That might be, a dinosaur. They do have mollusks preserved in the sample as well. Lots of lizards. They have gecko. What they found is even at 99 million years, the gecko feet were already highly specialized. And this is the weird one. This is, and the preservation, that's the scale preserved of these animals. This one is partly skeletonized. I'd say, oh, Amber's got the greatest presentation, or greatest preservation, but you've got one there that's skeletonized. What happened? What do you think? Yes?
It was a skeleton and then it got amberized.
Ah, that's thinking along the right lines. Something gets stuck in the resin, it's not completely buried, skeletonizes, the next flow comes down and completely encases it. Believe it or not, before they found the specimen, the oldest the oldest chameleon was about 14 million years old. They now have a chameleon at 99 million years old. And the gentleman, Dr. Juan Daza, who's at Sam Houston State, is the one that published on all these reptiles. We couldn't even unveil these at the opening of the exhibit because they were embargoed, which means that you can't display them until the scientific publication has been released. And so these were embargoed. What they found out about the chameleon, it's got the weird eyes, it's got a prehensile tail, it's got the projectile tongue, but those creepy, weird chameleon hands, it has just regular 5-finger sort of lizard hands. So there's certain things it has in common with the modern ones, but there's also things that are very different. Another new technology that we're using at the museum, which is very exciting, is there's other things that you can say, you can make the invisible visible. And what you do is you expose fossils to different frequencies of light. So in this case, we use a lot of infrared light, serious infrared light. I do have team assistants that help me with this. I have to wear gloves, long sleeves, goggles, because if you hold your hand under there carelessly for just a minute or so, you'll get sort of a pink sunburn, which I've done, because I'm, not smart. But anyway, you expose it to different light, and what it shows you is, the thing that I'm most excited about is soft tissue. But it will show you other things too. So this is a species of, it's a bowfin basically, it's a type of fish. This is Eocene, so it's about 45 million years old. This is a spectacular piece. And what it does is here you can really see ribble marks that are popping, but you see a few other things. Like this piece right here becomes more pronounced, right there goes more pronounced, right here goes more pronounced, and down here goes more pronounced. And as a curator, doing this to specimens is very important, because what you found out was that fossil wasn't originally on that rock. So the fossil is great. The quality of the bone is perfect, but to make it a nice square, that was added to it. You can tell everything about a fossil as far as glues used, all sorts of things like that. Now, this is a good pitch for steam. Now, these are all trilobites. And what you have to think about in trilobites is these things were encased in solid rock. Solid rock. Somebody had to do, very carefully, under a microscope, with a needle, somebody had to chip that out. I've met, and there's not that many people in the world that can work at this level. I've met a couple of them. They really are. But they have mad skills. Now, people do this commercially, and they hire people to do this. And there's a company that did this. They hired a bunch of people to do it. And guess who would you hire to prep trilobites? Who would you hire? Ah, he's way ahead. They didn't. They hired paleontologists, people that know the anatomy. Turns out, not smart. What was smart was to get people that were artists and people that had a sculpture background. And when you do that, it clicked. It worked really well. They were able to do it. They could see the thing in the rock. And this is a sort of a pitch for not just STEM, but for STEAM, meaning art is included. In paleontology, art is extremely important. And it's an integral part of the study because you have the evidence is fragmentary. You have to rely on tiny fragments, and you could report it in the form of data, but if you're able to completely build from the partial the whole, it works better. And who can do that? Artists. So there's great money to be made. If you're a scientific illustrator, I have a cousin that's a scientific illustrator, makes a ton of money, travels all over the world, does all sorts of things. And I have several volunteers that work for me that are teenagers that want to be artists, and I'm kind of trying to shove them down the scientific illustration path. But they're doing good. Another thing is, that's very interesting for all the arts, is you have to have somewhere to display this stuff. In welding, metal skills, metal shop, things that you would never, ever, you think, oh, they're going to work in an auto body. No. In science and paleontology, those skills are very important. Now, this is our project. We work in the red bed, and I work there with Dr. Bacher. And we do a lot of things in the museum. We let people work not with copies of fossils, they work with real fossils. Now, this young lady, this is actually a cast of a T-Rex jaw that we let people interact with. She's trying to make the T-Rex face right there. But the stuff that this gentleman's working with over here is actually original fossils, and the kids, by sorting, counting, because no science happens until something's sorted and counted, they're actually generating data. And I found them to be very respectful. And so we have these tables and things. This particular thing is from the Eocene. And what's interesting is, I've seen this many times, is that the kid will not want to leave. It is the parents that are saying, come on, we got to go. Come on, we got to go. Come on, we got to go. They'll stand there for hours if you let them do it. And of course, scientific illustration right there. And the other thing that we do, of course, this is all, we wet sieve everything. So these are all team volunteers that are going through the samples and getting out small teeth, small things. And we do something called Wash Day, where we had over 200 kids come out for this. And we had all these wash samples, and they would sit there and they would go through them very carefully and pull out small teeth, small scales, small bones, other things. Because in our project, we're not just interested in the major predator, the Metrodon, we're interested in the entire ecosystem. And then, of course, when I do take people with me up into the field, they have to learn how to measure everything. They have to learn how to do all the field methods that you have to do. This lady, I chose this particular picture. Oh, there you go. So they're learning how to use a level. They're learning how to use survey equipment. And they have to do that because we record, and that's the strength of paleontology and archaeology, is that you have associations with X and Y, but also Z. Things change over time, and you can see that, which is kind of fun. And oh, the other thing that we let them do, when we do teachers, they cannot collect anything from the Craddock Ranch and keep it. That's all museum property. But we take them to other sites where they can field collect as much of the stuff as they want. So their opportunity is they can take the stuff back to their classroom, they can bring the site to them. And you've got a great model of that exercise out here with some Michigan material that's Devonian, and you can do that. And our goal in this program is we don't want the teacher to go back to their classroom and say, well, Dave said this, or Dr. Bacher said that, or this person said this. We want them to say, I did this, I saw this, I did this. And it's actually worked. It's very good. I've got a letter that was written from a second grader that talks about their teacher, Mrs. Steinhardt, and all she ever talks about is fossils, fossils, fossils. It's like they took our teacher, she's teacher by day, paleontologist by night. And so it's worked out very well. And this tool that she's holding right there, if you actually ever want to dig, that's the tool that we use. We've moved thousands of pounds of dirt with a tool that size. Most paleontology is not quite at that level. We're digging the site, but in honesty, we're digging it like an archaeological site because we want to control all of the content. Now, this is another thing that we do. Is these are all first or second or third graders, and so we take them out, and they actually have to go and collect fossils, and they have to do reports. We prep them, and they identify them. And this is a Title I school. The first time I did this group, it was very funny because I have a great crew of volunteers. There's lots of volunteers. And when I said, oh, I've got a bunch of first, second, and third graders, we're going to collect fossils, and we're going to go do this, everybody was, they didn't say no. But when it came time to do it, a lot of them didn't want to go because it made them nervous. But that group was amazing. That was really an amazing group. And they were capable of using not just knowing the scientific terms, but all of the geology, everything. And I do believe that when they're exposed to the real thing, they know it. It's not just an exercise. And of course, here's some of the things they're collecting. This is an Eocene site that is in Texas, and it's really, if this happens again, your real estate up here is going to be worth a lot more. My real estate in Houston is going to be worth a lot less. Because this is the last time we didn't have any polar ice caps. So Austin was the coastline, or even north of Austin. So this is in Bryan College Station, and it was in deep water. So that's quite a bit further up. So for students, we do all sorts of things, the same kind of thing taken in the field. I have one favorite class of artifacts right here. It's these particular things right there. And that's something I want to take a minute to talk about briefly. Did you recognize what those are?
Teeth.
What are they? No, not teeth. What do you think they are? Poop. Poop, you're right. It's poop. Now, it's not dino poop, but it's poop. What's special about poop?
How will people eat or what they ate?
Right. So one of the things you can tell by studying poop, and this is gross because Rob and I, actually when we dug on the Levi Jordan site, if you were the new guy, the first day I dug on that site, they put you in the privy pit, the outhouse. You excavate a 100-year-old outhouse. So you're dealing, and human remains, or human coprolites are of course very valuable because you can chart what they're eating and all that. Same is true with paleontology. These coprolites are very interesting. Believe it or not, they're all from a certain kind of shark called the xenocant shark. And I love telling some stories about these things. One of the reasons is they're cut with grooves. That's how you know you can, because one of the tricks about coprolites is how do you know who made the coprolite? And in many cases you can't tell, and it's considered an ichthyofossil, and it gets its own name. You don't know what made that coprolite. In this case, you can tell. It's made by sharks. And this is kind of gross, but sharks' intestines are very, very, very tightly coiled because they digest everything. In fact, they're digesting up to the moment they poop it out. They leave nothing. And these things right here, those grooves are cut basically when it's pushed out, and because of the coiling of the thing, it comes out as a spiral, and then of course the anus cuts the groove, and it goes. Anyway, if you like poop, they're very interesting. Now, what, and kids do like this. I tell my docents, if you got a tour where it's not going well, and you feel like you need to call in air support, you don't need to call in air support. Take out the coprolite. That's all you got to do. And you see kids scratching on it and sniffing it and doing all sorts of things like that. So one of the things that I have that I'll be giving away today is I've made some scans, and actually some of my interns helped me do this, high school kids. We did light scanning of some of the fossils, and I actually do have the fossil here to share with you. And this is the fossil. This is what, when we found it, that's what we saw. This is what it looks like. And then of course here, I call it Moneyball. We have lots. Houston has a huge scientific community, and they love projects like this. They love it. So you can go to many hospitals and things like that, and they'll image things for you, and they'll help you create models and things like that. This is a Diplocalus, and I have some probably 1/6 scale models of this that I will be giving to pretty much everybody in here if you want one. And this, of course, is one of my students who's doing scientific illustration on the specimen that I have here. I'll show you in just a minute. This is what he looked like in life, and this is actually based on the specimen that I have here, and based on the specimen that I'll be giving you. That's what he looked like in life. There's a great internet hoax about this right now, and I'm proud to say they call it the Texas hammerhead salamander. And somebody claims to have caught one of these things. They got it in a bucket, and they're sending it out on the internet saying, "What is this thing? I got it on a cane pole with a worm. And what is it?" Well, it's been extinct for 287 million years roughly. It's a very interesting amphibian. It was alive, it's not alive now. But this is another thing that my interns are working on with. So this is one, on the one that I have here to show you today, and I'll be giving you, we only have the skull. This one is a whole one, a complete one. And that's one of the things in paleontology. If you want to be a good fossil in paleontology, what do you got to do? You want to be a fossil. What's the first? You have a checklist. What's the first thing you got to do? I want to be a fossil. Well, one thing, the best way to think of it is look at a dead animal by the side of the road. What happens to him over time? He gets run over, gets eaten. Bad things happen. It does not preserve. If you want to be a fossil, what do you got to do?
Keep your head with bones.
Keep your head with your bones, and how are you going to do that? And actually, it's not something you do. because it's like the lotto. You have to win the lotto to be a fossil. You really do have to win the lotto. And the odds of you being preserved as a fossil, depending on the environment you live in, are probably the same. What do you got to do?
Well, you have to be preserved in like mud or
Bingo.
amber or.
You got to be buried. You got to have some sort of thing that seals the contact. These things have their contact sealed. We actually find a lot of these. We have lots and lots of these things. And the reason why is they're estivating. They're burying themselves in a burrow. The rains never come. So they're completely petrified, intact, in their burrows, 100% complete. And then this is a light scan that we've been doing. We've been scanning all of our fossils and then reproducing them of these particular things. And the last thing that I'll do before I show this is another interesting area. And it's a STEM area, and it's an area that young people excel at, far more than me. Now, I was in the Air Force. I love flying planes. I was pretty good at the little ones. Not so great on the jets. So naturally, I buy one of these expensive drones, and I'm like, I got this. I got this. Well, now we're on Paleo 2, and we may be getting on Paleo 3, because we've had a few mishaps. Mostly it's pilot error. And these things actually have a chip in there, and when you send it in for warranty service after you've kind of landed it hard, they can tell you, no, it was crashed on this date at this time, and it broke this engine. They know everything. So these things have a little black box. Well, why are drones important? A lot of museums use these for prospecting. A lot of museums use them for documenting their sites. And that's exactly what I want to do with our site, is scan it and document it with this particular technology. And young people excel at this. And I have quite a few that are working on it. This is our educator site. And of course, you recognize the guy in the center. That's Dr. Robert Bacher. And these are teachers. And again, this is a live fire exercise. When there are teacher digs, you can take them on. You can take them in Texas, where they have everything very scripted, and you don't know what you're going to get. And you don't know what you're going to get. And that's one of the things I love about taking people in the field, because you have all sorts of things. If you don't know about the snakes, you don't know about the weather. This young lady right here, we had to hike out and cover a site to keep it from being destroyed. And while we were leaving, I said, hey, let's take the buckets. And she says, why are we taking the buckets? No, just trust me. Let's take the buckets. Why are we taking the buckets? Don't worry about it. Just take the buckets. Take the buckets. The reason is this area in Texas has hailstorms that will kill you. Kills livestock, do everything. And so when you're out there in a storm, basically the thought was, and there's no cover, there's no trees, the tiny little scrub cactus, that was going to be more or less what kept us alive. Not out of pain, but alive. And so this is part of the exercise. This is something that I think could be done with any museum pretty much, where we bring the site back. So the teachers all collected this material. We have some lessons and things on it. So when they take it back, they of course have the fossils to show. This is the fun part too. You never know how people are going to react when you take them into the field, but it's one of the great joys of field work is all the wildlife. And you don't know what you're going to see. And in Texas particularly, there's all sorts of things. Of course, Texas horned toad, we have lots and lots of rattlesnakes. The only thing that terrifies me, in fact, I'm on camera telling somebody as we're peeling off the tarps, I'm on camera saying, rattlesnakes don't get under tarps. We don't have to worry about anything. And I'm peeling the tarp back, and there's a rattlesnake right under the tarp, and it was a foot away from me underneath the tarp. The reason why it was there, it just killed and was eating a mouse that was living under the tarp. This thing right here, scorpion's not so bad. It's like a wasp sting. But this thing right here is the sum of all fears. I hate these things. And that's the only thing that we've ever had to actually enact our sort of rescue or take somebody to the hospital. Not the only thing, but that was the more serious one. And what's like the worst thing, and that's a centipede right there, it's a pretty big one. What's like the worst thing in your nightmare of nightmares if you're exposed to a centipede? What would creep you out the most? Goes in your ear, or what if it runs up your pant leg? And what if there's no way to get it out of there? And what if it gets excited and angry and starts biting once it kind of gets up? And that's what happened. So we had one of our female diggers was bitten in the groin by one of these things, and she said the pain was equal to childbirth. It was not pleasant, so we took her to the hospital. Incidentally, what's the other, and we're not in a desert environment, it's extremely hot, 120 degrees, 130 degrees, and this is so important, and it's a little bit off topic, but not really. for field science, one of the things you do, it's adventure with a purpose. So you go in the field to do science, but you also have to function in that environment. And one of the hardest, what do you think if you went out digging with me for, let's say, a couple weeks? We're going to be out there for a couple weeks. We'll come into town every now and then. We're going to be out there for 2 weeks. What's the one thing that you would think would give you the most trouble?
Water?
Yes, but what about the water? Here's the thing. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? Optimist or pessimist? What's the one thing?
All the water is going to evaporate.
Now, you keep that with you. The problem is this. If you're an optimist, there's bathrooms everywhere. If you're a pessimist, the bathroom is 40 miles away. So that's part of the problem. And so one of the things that you really have to do, and what do you do if you're terrified of having to pee behind a bush? What's the solution to that?
Optimist.
You don't drink water. And we're in a desert at 120 degrees. So we've lost 2. They didn't die. But one did have to go to the hospital for about a week. Because, also the other thing, what's the other worst thing that you could do when you're in this environment? Does anybody here have allergies? Anybody here take decongestants, antihistamines?
Is there any other mosquitoes?
What they do is they dehydrate you further. So if you're taking a lot of allergy medicine and you don't drink water, you're probably going to end up in the hospital, which is what happened to this young. So you do have to keep a very close eye on people. And I always terrify people who are in field camp. I go, okay, everybody's nervous about this. Nervous. Everybody's nervous. So if you have to pee, just right there. Go ahead, right there. Do it. And of course, nobody wants to do that. But you absolutely have to do that. Which this topic reminds me of this every time. We have a very earthy, older volunteer by the name of Gretchen Sparks. Gretchen Sparks was on the cutting edge for women in science. They did not want to let her take geology. They did not want to let her become a petroleum geologist. They did not want her to do any of these things. And the arguments they used were, well, where are you going to stay? This is all guys. Well, where are you going to go to the bathroom? The bathroom thing was very funny. She said, you know what? I don't have a problem with that. How about right here? And that kind of shut him up on that. So she had a long career and really it was a pioneer for women in geology because of that. She was able to do that. Now, a couple other things that we do that's very exciting is citizen science. And I absolutely believe and love citizen science. And all citizen science is where somebody like you would get to do this stuff and experience firsthand. And I believe in STEM education. I believe the stuff that doesn't just change the world. I believe it's the only way it's transformative. Because I just think about the things that I found in my life that I truly love, and it usually comes out of something like this. This is one of the gentlemen that helps us greatly on the field. Oddly enough, that little shaved Pomeranian rides with him everywhere on his shoulder. He looks like a Texas cowboy. He is perfectly, if you're a woman, he stands up, tips his hat. How are you doing, ma'am? Perfect. But the only thing that doesn't fit is that Pomeranian, which rides with him everywhere on his shoulder. I'm a little bitter about that Pomeranian. We found the thing that I stabbed at the beginning is an amazing Dimetrodon, probably the finest in the world. It's amazing. It's got a lot of taphonomy. It's a weird, weird specimen. I'm very proud to have that in Houston. And they're casting it. So there's really only one other cast of Dimetrodon that's available. So this one will be available everywhere. So we got, because we found this thing, we got the front page of the Houston Chronicle. They said, okay, you got this great specimen. They sent up photographers, took a bunch of pictures. We're going to give you the front page. We're not going to say above the fold, we're not going to say below the fold, but we're going to put you on the front page of the Houston Chronicle. Well, they did sort of. They didn't put the fossil on there. They put the guy with the dog on his shoulder. He ended up on the front page of the Houston Chronicle, and the story about our fossil and the pictures of that kind of got buried further back. But of course, one of the things is this is a cattle ranching country. We always take the kids out for sort of nature hikes, and of course these people raise longhorns. So I don't know what she's telling that longhorn. These longhorns are very friendly and they'll bump you. You have to be careful because they'll hit you with the horn. And this young lady, she's actually my intern this semester too, she's saying stop, stop. And of course the cow is not going to stop. We do a lot of other citizen science. This is something we did a field trip actually to Sollenhofen, Germany. This is one of my field people. I love her to death. She is a great-great-grandmother, and soon to be possibly a great-great-great-grandmother. And she found this in a quarry. And it's the rarest of the rare Sollenhofen insects. These two gentlemen that are with her right here, they've worked so often between them probably for 100 years, and they've only ever found one. So these things are very rare. Please let this work. And I have some pieces of this I can show you. Do you see the fossil? This is the other thing that will drive you crazy. When you're out there, everything either looks like a fossil or not looks like a fossil. But in reality, what you're looking for is any trace of past prehistoric life, and everything at some level is a trace of past prehistoric life. That thing that was right there is a small amphibian, and I have some pieces of it here I'll show you, and I'll see if you can spot it. See if you can spot the fossil that's in that rock. It's a small amphibian that looks a lot like an amphiuma. It lives in the mud, it's coiled, it eats by sucking, and it's slimy. And of course, when you find a fossil, you get to name it. And what we say is 2 syllables, clear your mind, what do you got? And of course, Bob was pushing me to name it after my first girlfriend. I wasn't about to do that, thought that might be a little awkward with the missus. And so I named it after my wife. And flash forward 8 or 10 years later, we're not together anymore. And I'm like, yeah, the universe was right. It's kind of weird. Let's just do that instead. So these are all coprolites that we found here. And this is what's exciting about the coprolite. That's the inside of the coprolite. What are those marks inside there? It's bone. So you actually really can't tell what's chewed up. And this is all the bone anatomy that's in there. So they really do have kind of, that's a tooth that's in the bone, that's in the coprolite. So Diplocaulus, and we'll finish with this. This is what, if you'd like one, I'll be giving you one of these today. That's how it was originally discovered. And then this is the pit where we had some other amphibians that we're about to publish on. This is truly old school. That's how we get out about an 8-ton jacket out of the field. In this particular thing, we're actually doing a paper on it next week. We think it's a new species, a new genus. And this man right here is not a paleontologist. This man right here is just a guy, but he gets all the credit for finding this, and also all the credit for helping us get it out, because he has a giant diesel front end loader. He was able to dig it out for us. And this is the reconstruction of the animal that's in that particular block. And what was amazing was there's all kinds of skills that are needed for doing the science of paleontology. These are all very delicate fossils, and he was able to wield a bulldozer like it's a fine tool and get it right out of there. I've only seen that done once, where he did a meteorite dig in Kansas, and the guy was amazing. He was amazing. And I had to come up to him after and say, how'd you learn to do that? Because you tell him 6 inches down. You take 6 inches off, the back of it. And he was very good. It was precision. I didn't want him to do that way because we were trying to do an archaeological dig of a giant meteorite because we wanted to see all this stuff associated with it. And he was nailing it every time. In fact, I said, how do you do this? He says, it's easy. I'm a grave digger. And that's true, because you don't want, Great Aunt Sally being mixed up with, the new one that you're putting in there. And these guys are precision capable. And that's what it looks like today. So we had to get that out in a hurry. Otherwise, we only had about a week, and it would be gone. And I have some other things here I'd like to show and share with you as well, if you have any questions. Yes, I will pass around the amber. Incidentally, what is amber?
Pre-resin.
I said sap too one time. Don't say sap. Don't ever say. To this day, I get taunted for having said that. It's not. It's actually a resin. And when you feel it, like this particular piece right here, if you feel that, what you'll notice is it's unbelievably light. It feels fake. And what it is it's a organic plastic. And it happens to have certain terpenes and things in there and certain compounds that completely arrest any decomposition. And if it stops things from rotting, what's another use that you could use it for? Embalming. It's exactly right. And that's why the Egyptians frequently resin-coated their mummies, for that reason alone. And it's embarrassing, but it's also a true story about King Tut. He couldn't get his golden mask off because of the resin that was on his wrappings. So, thinking outside the box, how do you think they did that? Didn't pry it. Got a blowtorch. Heated it. The resin got soft, they slid it off. So that was, you know, sort of a neat trick. But the particular amber that he has is it's from Sumatra, and it's about 4 million years old. This amber is, this is actually the Toka mine stuff. It's about 14 or 21. And this one is allegedly included. Anybody here like amber? Y'all fascinated by it? Why? Jewelry. It's precious. You put it in jewelry. It's precious. Why? Why do we think it's precious? And there's plenty of other cultures in the world that have no use for it at all. Why do we think it's precious? Why do we love it so? But not everybody. No, it's not that they don't have it. It's funny. I just love this sort of stuff. This thing is an echo. Because anything that you look at, culturally, it goes back to something. And what it goes back to, there are two cultures that revere and worship amber. The Greeks and the Chinese. And we got it from the Greeks. The Greeks actually thought this stuff was alive. And they thought it would do all kinds of things. So when you feel it, if you touch it, like if you had a piece of quartz and I had to put quartz in one hand and amber in the other, the amber is warm. It feels alive. It feels living. It's warm. And then if you take this amber and you rub it, we did you earlier kind of work. It's not going to be convincing. I'm going to try it in the show. You can make hair stand up. It holds static. And so the Greeks, you know, small bits of chaff or threads or things would be drawn to it. You go, it's warm, it has this weird force that will attract things to it, it's alive. And so they believed that, for instance, and the Romans picked up on it from there. The reason why the Roman Empire actually went the way it was is they were sick and tired of paying the middleman for amber from the Baltic. A piece like this could get you in Rome, AD 70, probably a nice family like yourself. You know, I'd give somebody this, and then you get to come on with me. And I would have just bought you. And of course, the gladiators, when they took you out, the amber would be studded on the litters, because of course they believed it had healing power. And if you look at New Age philosophy today, it's the same thing. They bought healing rings or chew on the amber, and it has a healing power to it. What's weird about it is that force, and like I'm kind of obsessed with Benjamin Franklin, and he was one of the people that did these experiments. That force was just magic. It attracts things, makes hair fly up, all that sort of thing. What is that? It's like the force, the Star Wars. You know, you can just point this thing and things move. You know, what's going on with that? They needed a name for that force because they observed it with other stuff too. And so what name did they come up with? What do you think the name they came up with? I'll give you a hint. The Greek word for amber is electron. And so our word, electricity, comes from this. And it's because it had that weird force. You charged up, it would attract things or repel things. So when they did the early experiments on that, that's how it went. But anyway, I'll pass that around. This is a piece of, that's gem grade stuff. And the other stuff that's going around is not gem grade. But amber it's a very fascinating material. And there will be other molecules that we found in it, not DNA, other molecules.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
it was interesting. I just thought Jurassic Park was such a cool idea. I mean, the idea that you could get a mosquito and it would have DNA from it. But what you're saying is that the amber is porous and it won't.
It won't. Now, at the time, they didn't fully understand that. And it was Michael Crichton that wrote that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael Crichton wrote that. And the thing I love about it is that, you know, the future of our science is science fiction. It's all science fiction. And so it's a great idea. And it are they going to get organic molecules? Yeah. Are they getting them now? Yeah, people are finding them. I've got a guy that's working on stuff, those weird Lysorobus things. They buried down in the mud. They got mummified, thoroughly mummified, and then they got lithified. And they didn't get lithified from the inside out, they got lithified from the outside in. They had caliche, the calcium carbonate that formed around them. Because this place was, the Smithsonian studies on the environment for this place that we're digging, in the summer, it could be as high as 150 degrees. So it was very, very hot. It was very, very wet part of the year, very, very hot. You have these minerals that form around these things. And so it's preserving some really weird stuff. We got a guy that thinks that he has collagen. So, you know, and they found that with some dinosaurs as well. Yes. Yes, sir.
If you backtraced skin, could you find out what they were eating?
That's an interesting question. And this is, I'm working on another exhibit, oddly enough, with my ex-wife. Seems like a really weird, somebody ought to do a TV show about this. The name of that exhibit is called Death by Natural Causes. And it's everything in nature that will kill you and how it kills you. Now, what that ties in directly to is they have some skin from some lions. Have you ever heard of the ghost in the darkness?
Yep.
They are credited with killing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And if you look into this, they're not even the number one. There's leopards that have eaten more of railway workers. And what they did is they were looking at the isotope analysis on the bones and I think on the skin, and what they were able to say was these things didn't eat hundreds of humans. They may have eaten dozens of humans. Now, do you believe them? The history from the railroads, the history from the people that were there, or do you trust the chemistry where they're saying because there's only a certain amount of this amino acid that's present, which would indicate that they were eating humans, who do you believe? I don't know. So you can kind of work backwards from that. And I can't explain how they do it, but people are.
Where do all the ambers come from for the amber woman?
Oh, it's all Baltic. So it's ESC.
Why is that? That's a lot of amber.
It is a lot of amber. And this deposit in Sumatra is a huge amount of amber.
Where did that amber?
The way you have to look at what happens with the amber. So these trees, and I had a piece, I didn't bring it, I wish I had. The amount of resin that these trees secrete, you can't, you have to see a chunk of it to actually get it. So I'm from the south, I'm used to pine trees, and you see little droplets. And other people here have gone, I found amber in Cretaceous settings, tiny little droplets, just like that. But these trees, they shed this stuff in huge sheets. I mean, it literally does flow. And what it is, it's usually it's a type of legume. What's the? I can't think of the name of it. But it's a conifer. But the way to keep in mind is that it's related to not all conifers are pine trees, and so these things secrete it in copious amounts.
And
While it was alive. And so then what happens is the tree dies, that all of the resin gets dropped to the ground, then it enters the rock cycle. It gets swept into rivers, swept into streams. And one thing about amber is it sinks in fresh water, it floats in salt. So you have these huge basins that would collect these things through the geologic process, then tectonic shifts, millions of years go by, and now suddenly it's on the bottom of an ocean. The stuff that's coming out of the Baltic is the current will actually break loose some of these pieces that are on the bottom, and it washes it into shore. But there's huge amounts of this stuff. This piece that I have in my office is about this big by like that. And it's a stalactite. It's something on a branch where it broke, and the resin was flowing down to here. I mean, it was amazing.
Are all these trees extinct?
No, there's still some today that are still doing the same thing. The stuff that's all the stuff that's in the Cretaceous time. It's from the basically Metasequoia. And how are they able to say Metasequoia? Because that's the most common leaf that they find in the amber. They're figuring either every one of these trees that was secreting this had a Metasequoia growing around them, or it was the actual Metasequoia.
There's certain parts of the world that one spot.
Yeah. And that's the way it is with fossils. And a lot of times these things are accumulated by geologic processes. So you may be able to find little bits here and there. There's some areas where there's lots and lots and lots. And Myanmar happens to be one of those areas. And they're using it sort of as a way to do development for their country. And at this point, when we first got the exhibit, they had 100,000 people working the amber. Now they're up to about 300,000. So every day, a new species is discovered. And it's all Cretaceous. It's really a hot area. Yes?
Oh no, this is a strange question. You were saying that
The answer is 17.
No. You're saying amber floats in salt water but not in fresh water?
Yeah.
Is there a theory that there's some type of component in amber that will actually absorb the salt particles in the water?
No. No. But it's interesting that it's funny because there's a chemical process that's involved. Because you've got copals, which are young, generally, because they don't have all the terpenes cooked off in ambers. It depends on where they're deposited, because you can have copals that are much older than some ambers. They're just not fully developed yet. It just depends on the geologic context that they're in, as to whether or not all the terpenes cook off.
If you dated back the skin of a dinosaur, would you be able to see if it was like a cave-dwelling dinosaur?
That's,
By the.
that would be a question that you have to figure out. I can't think of one, but there's probably some way. And what bothers me about this, these people have these great discoveries, I look at it and go, I could have thought of that, but I didn't. But that's, it'll fall to you and your generation to figure out that. And there's got to be some way to do it. Maybe not with dinosaurs, but with other animals, certainly. You can absolutely tell. So I do have these. I have some of these up front here. These, and I have more of them outside. In fact, if the kids want to do as an activity, these are, this is a about 1/6 or 1/9 scale model of our Diplodocus that we found. Not Diplodocus, I'm sorry, Diplodocus. And then, of course, if you want to get a closer look at the actual specimen, this is the actual specimen. So it's a type of amphibian that's about 283 million years old. And we've got whole ones in burrows. This particular one was found by a pretty famous children's author, and she named it after her son. So she named it Jeff. So this is named Jeff. And I've got a laser scan of this that I'm going to leave with the museum. They all have a specimen of this. But the 3D scanning is an area that's really taking off, and this is our first attempt. For instance, we have one side of the pelvis of our Dimetrodon. We don't have the other side. So we scan the side. We do have, flip it in the computer, 3D print. And there's a time, like you have some exquisite casts of fossils in your museum here. It's not too much further down the road that molding and casting may not be the way these things are reproduced. One of the largest companies in the United States for making museum quality replicas, the Black Hills Institute of Geologic Research in Hill City, South Dakota, they have laser scanned almost all of their inventory. So it's theoretically possible at some point in the near future, and this of course is a great STEM thing for computer whiz kids, that you can print out not just little tiny ones like I did with this one, but full scale, big dinosaurs. You 3D print. But this is the actual pelvis of a Dimetrodon. So we're missing one side, and I'm not quite happy with it, so we're going to redo it. But it's close. And you hold the real one up, and it's identical. Yes.
Our Southbridge Air National Guard base, they run a space camp for kids almost like, and they're 3D printing a dinosaur for their engines.
Yeah, a full scale one or half?
Full scale.
Full scale, yeah. And there's other new techniques. It's kind of STEM things. In a week, I have to go back and I have to mount a little dinosaur. It's a little dinosaur that's called Othnielia. And the guy that mounted it, oh my gosh, it's the only one I've ever seen like this. And he didn't do it the old school way, which is what Brian does and other people do, where you make cradles. And I mean, once you start looking at these things, the mounts they make to display dinosaurs are amazing. And the people that do that's art. It's amazing. That falls into art. How you can articulate it, how you can get the bones to cradle, how everything goes together. And believe me, if you don't do it in an artful way, it looks horrible. And it's not a very good thing. And I've run across those kinds of mounts as well. But what he did, new way of doing it, doesn't have it cradled. He's got in each little bone, he has, and I'm going to mispronounce this, but I'm from Alabama, so I got a license. A neodymium magnet, how do you say that? Neodymium, it's a rare earth magnet. Neodymium, I don't know. You would know. How do you say neodymium magnet? You're from Michigan, you should know this. I got a handicap. Whatever it is. Anyway, the bones will actually click on to the armature with magnets. So I'm actually very excited for him to come down and do it. I want to be there to watch it, but I want him to do it. It's his invention. So anyway, but thank y'all for coming out, and I really enjoyed Michigan, and I can't wait to come back.